What's up, guys? Good afternoon. Um, Hawk's Nest stream coming later tonight, about 3 hours from now, 7 o'clock Pacific. Set your calendars, set your alarm, try to be there. We always have fun. We're going to preview this Niners game, but this video's going to be about something that doesn't really pertain to anything with the team in terms of like the games, in terms of this season, in terms of where the team is going. No, this is kind of a blast from the past, but I want to talk about this because I think this is pretty cool. I think this is probably a little overdue, and I'm happy that it's happening. So, it was announced earlier today that we were going to have another addition to the Ring of Honor in Seattle. We were going to have another Ring of Honor member for the Seahawks. I believe it's the 15th person to ever be put in the Ring of Honor. Shaun Alexander. Going to happen later this year during halftime of which I think it's the Cardinals game. So I'm pretty happy about this, and I want to talk about this for a little bit here because obviously Shaun Alexander hasn't had anything to do with this team for a while. He has nothing to do with what this team is going to do this year or next year or the year after. But I want to take one video to talk about this because I like bringing Shaun Alexander back into the Seahawks community, I guess we're going to call it. I like bringing him back into the fold. And over the last decade plus, really, I've been waiting for more recognition of Shaun Alexander. And as time went by, it continued to feel like I think he raised the 12 flag in one game fairly recently, but for a long time it felt like he was an outcast of the Seahawks community. When you thought about the players who were part of the Seahawks, were great, retired, but continued to be part of the Seahawks community, you would think about guys like Kenny Easley, Cortez before he passed, Walter Jones, Steve Largent. It didn't feel like Shaun Alexander was part of that, and I know why. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why. But regardless of knowing why it was the case, I always felt that was kind of a mistake, and I hope that with this, Shaun Alexander can start to get his due as a legendary all-time Seahawk, and as somebody who was growing up in my teens when Shaun Alexander was doing what he was doing, I'm excited to see him finally get inducted where he clearly, based on his career achievements, belongs. So, some of you guys probably don't really remember Shaun Alexander. He hasn't played football since 2008. He hasn't been a Seahawk since 2007. So, for some of you guys, he was before your time. Some of you guys barely remember him, but when I first started rooting for the Seahawks, we had some good players, maybe even a few great players. Like we still had Cortez, but the first time the Seahawks mixed having an a great player and a great team was when I was a teenager in the early to mid 2000s with Shaun Alexander and 5 straight playoff appearances during his time in Seattle. The last 5 years he was in Seattle. And it all culminated, obviously, in 2005 when he won MVP. He was the best player in the league. He set, at the time, a record for touchdowns in one season with, I think it was 28. And that team, which, by the way, had nothing at receiver because of injuries, ended up going 13-3, went to the Super Bowl, didn't win. But I think that after that, that was obviously the peak of the Shaun Alexander era. Things went downhill so quickly for him in particular that by the time he left, people had a more negative outlook of him. And I get why. I know why. It doesn't take a genius to tell. But if you really take a look at this guy's career, this is some pretty all-time legendary stuff. 100 touchdowns. After taking basically his first year as a training wheel year, right? Because we had Ricky Watters and Shaun Alexander was being slowly brought up behind Ricky Watters. He gave you almost 1,200 rushing yards. He gave you almost 100 yards per game from scrimmage in most seasons. Some years he was pushing up closer to like 130 yards from scrimmage per game. He was a touchdown machine. He gave you 100 touchdowns in his Seattle career. And that production, I think people, especially in the modern NFL, when you compare them to modern running backs that don't get to that point pretty much ever, and the ones that do typically don't last as long as Alexander did, because he gave you 5 years of elite running back productions, at least 14 touchdowns, and I think all those years at least 100 yards per scrimmage from scrimmage per game. So we are talking about one of the all-time touchdown machines in NFL history and one of the most productive running backs ever. Honestly, I think he deserves the Hall of Fame. When you look at these numbers, just shy of 11,000 career yards from scrimmage and exactly 100 rushing touchdowns plus the 12 receiving, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. If you're going to put Edgerrin James in the Hall of Fame, then Shaun Alexander should be in there as well. I know why he kind of got turned into an outcast after he left. He was a little bit too much me. He wasn't as much about the team as you would like. Sure. He made it clear that he was out for himself on occasion, more so than the average player. And after he got paid in 2005, the production fell off a cliff. The last 2 years, he barely averaged 3.5 yards a carry. He was injured a lot. He played in 10 games a season for the next 2 seasons before we let him go and ate significant dead money. But before then, he played in every game. If you look at the first 6 years of his career, he played in every single game. He started every single game 3 years. So we didn't know back then. We didn't understand at the time, guys. You gotta realize this. We didn't understand fully how bad an idea it was to give a running back 350 plus touches for 5 straight seasons, have him turn 29, and then give him a massive contract. We didn't fully understand how bad an idea that was at the time. We know better now. But with the knowledge that we have now, I think we can all understand that you give a dude 350 touches, 5 straight seasons, and get that kind of production out of him, well over 10,000 yards over that 5-season stretch alone, he's going to wear out, and he's not going to have a heck of a lot to give you after that. And that doesn't get into the fact that he started to get hurt. That doesn't get into the fact that you took away what made him special. Shaun Alexander was a vision back. He was one of the greatest vision backs of all time. You give him the ball, you let him try to find the hole, and he finds the hole, he blows through it, and that's how he made his living. He was not somebody who ran everybody over. He wasn't somebody who outran everybody. He didn't have the Barry Sanders jukes and moves and jives. No, he was just a guy who would look for the hole, look at the blocking scheme, anticipate where the space was going to be, and hit that space. And when you took away Steve Hutchinson from him because of an idiotic front office mistake after 2005, the holes were just not there the way they used to be, so the production fell off. If it wasn't for that, I think Shaun Alexander would have had more good, productive years in Seattle and probably built that Hall of Fame resume. I mean, of course, as far as I'm concerned, he has the Hall of Fame resume anyway, but he's not in the Hall of Fame right now, and it's probably not happening, so I'm just saying that if he had gotten to stick with the offensive line, which allowed him to be the best version of himself, unlock the tremendous vision that made him a special player, then I think we'd be feeling very differently about him. So this stuff about how, he got paid and then he stopped caring, no, I don't. There have been players in NFL history that have done that. I've seen it. Albert Hainsworth, great example. Got paid, stopped caring. But I don't think that happened with Shaun Alexander. But that stigma stuck with him. It made him an outcast after he left Seattle. He wasn't talked about in the same way Seahawks fans would talk about guys like Largent and Cortez, and even guys like Dave Craig and Jim Zorn, and guys who didn't accomplish half as much as Shaun Alexander, they were still more beloved because there was this sense that Shaun Alexander was out for himself, only cared about money, and didn't really care that much about the team, that he took too much money. It's a lot like what we're dealing right now with Russell Wilson. And to me, it's the same thing. Like right now, Russell Wilson's still in the league. He's on another team. He's on a team that, by the way, we have the first and second round picks of in this upcoming draft. So yeah, I'll root against him. I got no problem with booing him. I fully support that. But once Wilson retires and he's no longer working for the enemy, and when I say enemy, I mean any team that isn't the Seahawks, so I'm talking from that perspective, it's nothing but love. He gave us 10 great years. Same with Shaun Alexander. Once he retired, which he basically did when he left Seattle, but once he retired, was out of the league, once you get past that initial distaste with how things ended, and the fact that the Shaun Alexander era didn't end in a Super Bowl, should be a lot of love. A lot of love for a guy who got in the end zone 112 times for you. Had almost 11,000 yards from scrimmage. It was also, to a certain extent, to be totally fair, he wasn't much of a playoff performer. 3.3 yards per carry in the playoffs. Never had above a 4-yard per carry average in any one playoff run. Okay, not exactly a dream playoff performer, but regardless, you can't deny the production that he put up in the regular season across a period of time where most running backs don't excel. We are talking about a guy who was one of the best running backs in the league for 5 straight years, getting 350 plus touches a game. So I'm happy that he's getting brought back into the fold a little bit, and I hope people can start to really appreciate what he did now that he's long out of the league. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Shaun Alexander was the first truly great Seahawk player that I really remember. There were other ones maybe a little before him or even concurrent with him, but Shaun Alexander was the one who was legendarily great during a time when the team also achieved some greatness. They didn't get the ultimate greatness. He didn't have the greatest attitude in the world. He was a little more me than you would want from a superstar player. Sure, these things did not help. If it wasn't for those things, he probably would be embraced the way we embrace guys like Steve Largent and Walter Jones. But we should be years past that by now. Just like we are with Richard Sherman, right? Richard Sherman left the Seahawks, had nothing but negative things to say about us, and joined the 49ers. Yeah, I didn't like that dude for a while. He tried to ring chase with Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. I don't like that, but now he's out of the league. Now he's, on good terms with the team. Now it's nothing but love. He did great things for this team, and I'm not going to forget that just because he did some other things that I didn't like. And Shaun Alexander has done something that no other player in Seahawks history has. He's won an MVP while he was a Seahawk. All right? What other Seahawk players come close? You know how hard it is to win league MVP? Russell Wilson never got a vote. No player from the Pete Carroll era, which has produced so many playoff wins and all this success, with the exception of Bobby Wagner, who got one ridiculous, silly, garbage vote from Tony Dungy one time, has gotten a vote. Who was even in the running from the previous Seahawks eras before Shaun Alexander? Didn't happen often. So, for that, I'm happy that Shaun Alexander came through my life when I was a younger football fan. And I really hope that this can be the start of us starting to remember Shaun Alexander the way we should. An imperfect player, an imperfect person, but not a bad person, not at all a bad player, and somebody who was incredibly productive for a long time. All right, this video's gone on too long, but I'm happy about this. He deserves to be in the Ring of Honor. He was in the conversation for the best player in Seahawks history, and honestly, given the fact that he's got the MVP award that nobody else has, still does. You don't see running backs be this good for this long in the NFL very much anymore. So, especially now, you should appreciate what he managed to put together. All right, I'll see you guys in 3 hours or so for the Hawks Nest collab stream. Hope to see you there. Go Hawks.